in that regard and focused on the TSEPO 1 million program. So some of the work that we're doing with regards to addressing the reality that the FMCG sector has been impacted by the recent riots and the need to ensure that there is access to infrastructure for the movement of goods, the storage of goods. We have started working with the industry, our colleagues in KZN and the DTIC, to ensure that we can respond to the challenges as listed there, the number of retailers that have been looted and so on. And therefore the partnership is on ensuring that we can support these enterprises to continue ensuring that there's reliable supply of a whole range of goods, consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, which have also been impacted, and other industries that require support. So the initiative, together with our partners, the DTIC, Proudly SA, GDAT, the other department in our portfolio, Woolworths, Pick n Pay, Massmart, is focusing on ensuring that we can facilitate increased SME participation in major retailers. So that in that way we facilitate and enable that when people look at the malls, they are also active participants in what is actually traded in the malls. So part of the discussions we're having is about how do we, through supplier development and enterprise development, both of public and the private sector, can ensure access to market and access to the shelves for local enterprises. This is intended to diversify SME participation in food products, packaging and bottling, healthcare and pharma, household cleaning products, electrical appliances, auto components and others. So we're looking at incubating and supporting local community-based enterprises to be able to access the shop floor and the shelves, and that adequate support is provided to these, both in terms of industrialization, but also commercialization of products, and ensure that these are accessible in the shopping centers and so on. We're also looking at deepening value chains by guaranteeing income and expanding investors with a list of local suppliers and SMEs. And we're looking at a database that's been compiled to deal with this. Issues around localization I've made reference to, but there's also the reality that we need to close the gap of those companies that have been displaced in KZN in particular in the FMCG value chain. It is estimated that 70% of what is moved from KZN to other provinces in terms of fast-moving consumer goods is actually destined for the province of Gauteng, either for redistribution or consumption in the province of Gauteng. So when these values or these supply chains are impacted on, it has a significant impact on the local economy, but also a significant impact on how and how much we export, particularly into SADC. So GDD, the Economic Development Department, is to assemble a list of available warehouses, and this work is being done through our Gauteng Growth and Development Agency, so that we are able to create access to warehousing and other logistics support to enterprises that have been displaced in KZN, some of whom are looking for supplementary facilities, some of whom are looking for temporary facilities. And we're working with our colleagues at national government and in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in this regard. On trade and investment side, and we'll indicate what the contact details are, we're providing virtual business support programs to ensure that we are able to address the needs and queries and challenges of our investors in the province. We're rolling out a business support set of programs for companies in distress, and a whole range of other interventions that we're doing in this regard. Now, coming to some of the financial instruments, because those were the non-financial instruments that we're looking at. Many of you would know that the province had allocated the department, and through the department, the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, 250 million to focus on small, medium, and micro enterprise development in terms of financing. And there were two critical elements of that mandate, or that allocation, that the province had mandated us to undertake. The first was to ensure that the 250 million is able to gear other investors to come on board. So we are investing our own money, but we're using this as a means to leverage other partners to come on board. So the province said, we're giving you money, but it's seed capital. Go and find partners and multiply this money. The second is the province said, we want you to ensure that this money, as it multiplies, also rolls itself over and over again. So when you get the money back, you're able to invest in other enterprises. So the money is not intended for one enterprise and move out, but it's intended that those that repay the monies, depending on the instrument that you give them, do that within a reasonable time, so that in fact this can also then be extended to other enterprises. So those were two critical mandates in what we were mandated to do. In this regard, we have firstly confirmed a partnership with the Industrial Development Corporation, who have also committed portions of their own money to add on to our 250 million, with an initial tranche of 50 million, and I'll indicate other tranches that they've committed to. But there's 50 million that's going to the rebuild fund, and I'll talk to that. But they've also committed to invest in other instruments. So we've got the IDC as partners. Both the boards of the IDC and the board of the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller have approved this funding mechanism. So it's actually now gone into being a joint fund where we are leveraging off the IDC and their platforms, but also their investment. So Premier, in my scorecard, at least we have not multiplied yet, but we have added the IDC. Now, how does this fund work? It is intended that it would be a wholesale fund. So we're putting money, IDC is putting money. We then say that this money is going to leverage other private sector partners to come on board. And we've got a list that has already been lined up. We've committed to say we want to participate in these levels of enterprise funding for SMMEs in the province of Gauteng. Now, these bodies with these companies have now been referred to the joint governance mechanisms that we've established with the IDC. So there's a joint investment committee that makes decisions on the allocation of resources, and there's a joint policy committee. The IDC chairs the investment committee, which are the policy committee. And then these would go into intermediaries. So the intermediaries pay the wholesale fund, which is ourselves and IDC, and they go to the retail funders based on the policies and parameters we've set for them. And we're also using their platforms to be able to get our monies back and to be able to administer these resources. So without going into the details of other funds, we're looking at a fund jointly with the IDC. The other 50 was on the rebuild fund. The 100 million is looking at rapid deployment of funds to enterprises in the township, which would be based on a blended financing model of 50% grant and 50% loan. We're anticipating that with the list of other partners that have been identified that have also submitted applications, we'll be able to gear this up to an estimated 1 billion rand. We're establishing a retail fund together with the property sector. We've committed an initial 10 million. We've got a few of these that have committed. One has committed 20 million. A few of those have committed 10 million each. We're trying to pump this up by next week to 100 million. That would focus on retail financing mechanisms for retail enterprises in the townships. And these would provide different levels of support to retailers in the township. So I'm not going to go through the detail of the fund, the details of which we anticipate to unveil either towards the end of next week or early the following week. And this would look at tenants inside the malls, but also enterprises outside the malls. We had a productive discussion with the Premier and the South African Property Owners Association yesterday, at which they committed to participate in the economic rebuilding and acceleration program and to establish jointly with the Public-Private Growth Initiative and the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa an action lab that's focused on the task that I referred to earlier about ensuring access to opportunities for local township-based manufacturers, enterprises, and so on. I'd like to skip the next few slides. Safe to say that there are a number of other interventions where we're looking at other solutions, working with SASSA on social relief grants and food vouchers. We're looking at tech platforms together with the retail sector, some of which has already been deployed and is now intended for extension into the townships. I'm not going to talk about the Township Economic Development Act. Safe to say that the legislature published this for public comment, which is closing today. It will then go into the committee cycle for approval in the provincial legislature. So as I said, without going into that, I think we've shared a lot of this over the past few months. These are the commitments that provincial government has agreed to ensure access to economic opportunities for township-based enterprises, with departments committing to procure from township-based enterprises, including on the maintenance budgets. We're establishing a purchase order financing instrument dedicating about 86 million rand to a purchase order or invoice financing stroke factoring facility for enterprises that interface both with ourselves and our private sector partners. Premier, in the interest of time, I suggest maybe we shouldn't go through the list of what other departments are doing. Safe to say that we're not working alone as a department, so we're working with other departments. I did say that some of the instruments that we're looking at are tax-related instruments, but we don't levy tax as provincial government, so we are working very closely with national government departments to formulate possible tax instruments and how we can contribute to enabling these. So even this I won't go into, but it just constitutes, and you'll see the slides, what we have packaged as a lobby agenda that we're currently designing, different instruments for implementation with national government. We are also seeking to and have made applications for access to the presidential employment stimulus program which has got a set of resources that have been announced current financial year, 11 billion rand, so we're packaging projects for implementation through the presidential employment stimulus package, and this will do working with local government. These are the programs that we're looking at for purposes of the presidential employment stimulus program. It's just a list of the engagements that we have started. I won't go through the next steps. There are a number of steps that the province has said we should undertake. This was indicated on Wednesday, so we've already had the engagement with SAPOA. We'll be meeting with township-based enterprises. Some of them are meeting tomorrow. We're also having others. Over the next week, we're meeting with captains of industry. We're also engaging with individual enterprises and so on. Now, how do people access these facilities? Essentially, for those who are looking at financial type support, they can go directly to the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, through whom they would be able to access all the other facilities that I spoke about. And for those that are looking for investor support and so on, including the warehousing facilities and so on, these can contact the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency. Thank you very much, Premier and colleagues.